notes for us. And
all right, pulling up the notes. Hey, the show is mental traps that cause
what's health
health
problems?
problems. Right. So this is Fit to Heal. And today we have the good brother Dan Trez Omi, my brother from another mother and pops, Dan Trez Omi. And we also have brother Minister Zumbi. And incoming will be the Queen, Rosalind, the creator. That's coming up soon. But right now we have Dan Trez and Minister Zumbi. Why don't you start us off, man? What are some of the things that are mental traps that cause health problems?
I think I want to just real quick in her notes. She said one of the bullet points that she wanted us to go over was coping mechanisms, and I think that for and again, I'm not pointing fingers. I'm not laying blame. I'm not. I don't want to do that because I don't think our ancestors and our elders and our exemplars and our parents and our families didn't have the tools to cope. Didn't have the tools to teach us how to cope. So because of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, they weren't given those tools. So those tools, those mechanisms, those coping mechanisms weren't given to us. And they dealt with how they dealt with. They dealt with what was going on the best way that they could. And a lot of us inherited that. I know people call it cycles. We inherited those cycles because they didn't know. So there was a lot of things that I picked up from my folks that were harmful, but they were coping mechanisms. But I don't like to lay blame on them because that was something that was thrown on them. So thankfully today we're learning different coping mechanisms to get away from
that. It's kind of interesting. It reminds me of that old Mobb Deep song, Drink Away the Pain.
Yes.
And you were talking about, I guess you would call it multi-generational, let's call it multi-generational self-medication.
Yes.
Okay. And, I remember when I was listening to that song, it's like understanding the time frame in which that song came out in, I'd say the mid 90s, around 94, 95, it kind of gave us a window of how that young generation was coping with the realities of being in Queensbridge and other urban areas that were experiencing similar turbulences as Queensbridge.
Exactly. And Prodigy and Havoc are my age. So that's my generation.
Okay.
Right there. That's my generation. So that's how we drank away the pain. And that's something that we inherited. You're exactly right.
And so when you talk about, and I don't really like using the word coping because to me it's like tolerance.
Exactly.
Because one of the things Bobby Wright, our ancestor, Dr. Bobby Wright said, I think it was either he or another of our psychologists who says that the purpose of psychology is to get you to adjust to the insanity of the society in which you have to navigate.
That was Bobby Wright. Wright. Yeah.
And it seems like, and even Dr. Amos Wilson talked about how everything is addressed except the environment, except the society in which you have to operate. It's left off the hook.
Exactly.
Okay. And we never really deal with, I heard a metaphysical minister once say, there's nothing wrong with us, but something has happened to us. Whatever that something that happened to us was or is, it seems to be, I dare say, epigenetic. Where like you were talking about earlier, things being passed down from generation to generation, and there has to be a generation to break that cycle to start a more healthier cycle of future generations, whatever that will take. And I think you were alluding to that in your situation. Were you that generation that had to break that self-destructive cycle or coping mechanism?
I think, to be quite honest, and again, I don't like pointing fingers. I think our generation made it worse, right? you know, because I work with, you know, I work with middle school kids. I work with young people, young boys in particular is my focus. And a lot of the things that they do, they mimic my generation, right?
Okay.
So I know like my peers will say, well, this current generation is doing X, Y, Z. And I'm like, well, we kind of like, you know, again, I hate to be this way. We kind of look at Biggie Smalls as like the epitome of MCing, right? When a lot of the behaviors that he talked about were not positive and they were not healthy at all.
Right.
So a lot of my students like, I want to hear Biggie, you know, like, or they'll play a song and I'm like, wow, that sounds very similar to what we were saying, you know, back in the 90s and the early 2000s, you know. Right. So a lot of the stuff that they're doing, they're just mimicking us.
Right. And then, you know, for me, because I'm Gen X, I would have to really rewind to the Vietnam era.
Okay.
And the reason I'm starting there is because of the emergence of heroin. And you being from Harlem, you know what heroin did to New York City.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go from Vietnam when these soldiers were coming home addicted to heroin. Then we moved into cocaine. Then we moved into the crack era. Okay. And I dare say that when you were talking about Biggie's lyrics, would you say, even though his parents came from Jamaica, landing in Bed-Stuy, that Biggie's lyrics were a product of the crack epidemic of the 80s?
Agree 100%.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I guess.
Okay.
The music is a reflection of what was going on at the time. So yes.
Right. Okay. So you know, so that's why, and I think you would agree with this, is that I never try to view things in a vacuum. I always try to put them within the context in which they operate, because I think previous generations have a nasty habit of looking at younger generations in a vacuum.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, for example, how can I blame the youth without me looking at the 1980s of what I call the R&B era, Reagan and Bush?
Yeah.
Okay. and what those foreign policies did when they introduced, you know, a cheaper form of cocaine, crack cocaine, into the cities, and then, you know, created, basically wiping out. I heard a former CIA agent say this, that what heroin and cocaine did is that they took out 2 generations of Black and brown youth away from participating in the political arenas.
Agreed.
Okay. So it still has that rippling effect that I think we're still feeling today. Just like I always talk about how we're still suffering from what I call the Gordon Gekko era, from the corporate raiders of the 1980s, and how we're still paying for the sins of the past. And the same here is, we still have not learned how to use healthier methods of dealing with navigating through this, what I call insane toxic incubator that I call racism, white imperialism.
No, 100% agree. You're right. And I think going back a little bit further, and I don't want to get like too deep into that part, but
yeah,
you know, heroin was released to the streets because a lot of our young people were radicalized, right? They were, you know, by the way, there was the Black Panther Party, the Young Lords, the Black Liberation Army. A lot of them were being radicalized, and then they had to flood the streets with heroin. Especially when you had soldiers coming back from Vietnam and they knew how to fight, they knew how to organize, they knew how to do all those things. So they definitely had to do that, and they continued with crack cocaine. And then now it's with lean, and now with more prescription drugs. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay. I think we have our elder on.
Yes, we
do.
Hey,
brothers.
Peace.
How we doing? I was in the wrong room.
Oh, Lord.
Don't leave me alone too long with machinery.
Okay.
I'm digging the conversation. I was enjoying hearing myself talk for a minute, but it just got old. So. Papa Seiko came and says, "You're in the wrong stream." So
Oh Lord.
I decided to come over here and join you guys, and so happy I did. I'm so glad to see you, Brother Shawala. My
Thank
brother,
you.
peace. How are y'all?
Peace.
Getting into it, huh?
Good.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Mental health traps that cause health problems.
Mm-hmm.
It is amazing that you just mentioned about the epidemic with crack cocaine and heroin and how it came into the picture right after the Vietnam War. And the point was critical because that's what happened. We don't want when they didn't want strong the ones who survived, the strong ones, to come back
Mm-hmm.
and can continue with the, I guess, the extension of the family. If the point is to destroy the family, and it is,
Right.
just be honest, then the family structure would have to have a man, a husband, a wife,
Mm-hmm.
and then the children.
Right.
And if the trick or the trap is to destroy that, it is critical for that agenda to keep the union of the man and the wife, the husband and the wife, the man and the woman, separated. So what means did they use to do that? Right after the 70s, when all of this revolution was taking place, was to implement a poison that could destroy it.
Right.
As it's quite clear as the nose on my face.
Okay. As the elder, something came to mind from your vantage point. How much has PTSD played in, the mental traps that cause health? And for the audience, PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. A lot of those revolutionaries of which you spoke, be it the Panthers, the Young Lords, the Brown Berets, American Indian Movement, all of them have suffered some level of PTSD. And then those just regular folk, having to navigate, the 70s and then going into the 80s, political stresses, economic stresses, having to deal with the safety of your children with the emergence of crack cocaine and how it transformed cities into living nightmares for many of our people. What role do you think that post-traumatic stress syndrome plays in that, as a mental trap that causes not just mental health problems, but physical health problems?
Well, I think your answer was in your question.
Okay.
I treat clients who suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder, and whatever their nationality, their race, or what sex or whatever, everybody has a level or degree of trauma that they've endured. Just living in this country is traumatic enough. Just looking at the news can be traumatic. But when they call it post-traumatic stress, the stress from the trauma, whatever that trauma was specifically because you're looking at a situation that you have no control over. You can't stop the madness. You're looking at your country doing like this over time. You're looking at the people in your country, their mental and physical health decline over time. You're looking at the education of your children, the way they function in society, how they treat their elders, just declining over time. And what are you going to do? You're going to sit back and just, I can't believe it. I'm constantly in that place where I'm looking at things that I just can't believe that are being allowed to happen, where you're teaching the children that education is not important or as important as everything else. Gaming, television, Housewives of Bel Air, or whatever this foolishness they're looking at. The education, and in this particularly in this country, based upon what I've witnessed in my lifetime, there is no education. It's been annihilated. It's destroyed. It's almost as if the agenda is we don't want the children to be smarter. We want them to be dumb. That's traumatic. Okay. And dealing with the after effects of that trauma or that realization is even more traumatic. And that's a stressor. Like, there's nothing you can do. I'm living in a country where literally people are dying, being murdered, they're broke, they're not getting the best nutrition. But you said it's the greatest country in the world. I'm here. I'm not seeing greatness. I'm seeing everything but. So it's everything is culminated into the destruction, the destruction of the country. And there's nothing that I have seen, and I was just talking to myself a few minutes ago about how we're conditioned as children to how to cope. We're not. What happens to us just happens. A lot of young children that I personally know who ended up growing up into adults that were abused, neglected, molested, put on drugs, really early, just treated horribly. And when our soul comes into this earth and this planet and this plane, and they come in a suffering environment, and they have to live in a suffering environment, and nobody is soothing them. There's nobody soothing them. There's nobody to come here, baby. Not even the grandmothers anymore, because they have their own agenda. So when you think about the lifespan of a human being, I'm going to use my children, for example, or my children's era, because I didn't do this. I nourish my children. If you take a child, a baby, and a woman, a mother, even if there's a husband in this situation, they come home. The doctor says, "Hey, you don't need those boobs. Let's dry that milk up. Here, take this powder, add water, shake it up in a bottle, put this rubber nipple on it, and shove it in this baby's mouth. And when that baby gets old enough, he can sit up. You sit there and you hold that bottle up in their face prop it up with some pillows, and let the baby kind of hold the bottle himself until they fall asleep. Right? And then when that baby gets a little bit older and they can sit up, you sit them in front of a TV and you give them a fictional character to look at, maybe Barney or some foolishness like that. And then when they're a little bit older, you take them and you put them in a daycare where they're there abruptly from the time your maternity leave ends at 6 weeks, and you put them in these strange environment with these strangers and make them stay there all day while you go back to work. And you come back and pick them up, and that kid is like, what did you do to me? They can't express that, but what was this? What is this? I wanted to be home with, at least looking at Barney or something. And then you go and give them some food, but you nuke it in the microwave. Wait a minute. You stop at McDonald's on the way home and the food gets cold, and then you nuke it in the microwave and you give it to that child. What is that child missing? Just tell me. What do you think the child is missing?
Danny?
A lot. Is missing a lot. I thought that was rhetorical. My bad.
No.
I thought that was rhetorical. The child is missing everything. I know that. Speaking from experience, being the father of 4, I know it was crucially important that when my children came out the womb, that I was supposed to immediately place them on their mother's chest before I cut the cord, and they were supposed to start breastfeeding at that moment. Then I cut the cord. That's one thing that I know off the rip, that's what's supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. So if that's not happening, because that's where they get that bond,
right?
Automatic bond is when they first latch on right after they come out the womb, and that is crucial to their growth and development. I can't explain
and
how
their
crucial.
Immune system.
Yes. Yes. So
breast milk. The colostrum from the breast milk is a vaccination times 1,000.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
And I think that also speaks to, and I always bring this up, culture. Okay. How have Black and brown people engaged in, child rearing and family building versus, it kind of reminds me of Diop's 2 cradle theory. If you're familiar with that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's like, how is it that we are supposed to act as our authentic indigenous selves inside this toxic incubator that is the total antithesis of who we are? Everybody wants to talk about the whole thing about crabs in the barrel. What they don't tell you is that the barrel is not an indigenous environment to crabs.
Facts.
Okay. So if you put the crabs in their indigenous environment, their behavior changes. So instead of being competitive, they become collaborative. Okay. So what does it mean culturally in terms of how we, in fact, I was watching a Discovery Channel show called Warriors. Okay. A former Green Beret goes around the world and study warrior culture of different nationalities, different ethnicities. He happened to be in South Africa, and he was amongst the Zulus. And what was real interesting was this: the elder was explaining to the former Green Beret. He says, once the war is over, there is I guess you would call it either a debriefing or a detoxification period where we don't bring them immediately back into society. We have to allow, we have to allow that savagery to be out of them before we allow them back into society. And that really resonated with the Green Beret. He says, if only we as what he was saying, if only we as Americans, in terms of how they treat their soldiers, would take a similar position as the Zulus do when their soldiers come home from battle, because they understand that war is a very savage situation. It's a very turbulent, brutal, inhumane situation, and there has to be time for those soldiers to get that trauma out of them, because they don't want that trauma coming back into their village. Okay.
I think I saw this show. Okay. I'm trying to remember. It sounds very familiar. But if I'm not mistaken, there was a tribe. I think they were maybe South American or something. They would put like something sharp objects to their skin and getting prepared. Maybe it's not the same, prepared for the battle. But can you imagine? You use the word inhumane. You described a tribe of warriors coming back from battle and having to be decompressed before going back into their society. And I mentioned a baby coming out of the womb with a rubber nipple being shoved in his mouth. Its mother's very things that she was born to do with her body, dried up with sage so that she can't give the baby what the baby is required, so that the medical institutions can keep their pharmaceuticals alive by putting them in the baby for the vaccinations, which the body, the woman's milk, would have automatically given them.
Right.
The level of inhumanity in our humanity, it's very, to me, it's very disgusting. And I can't even think of an adjective to describe how savage it is, but I love the word that you used. It's savagery. These are human beings coming into the world, having brought parents who having brought a life into the world. These are human beings who gave their lives to war for their families. And here are these, we're talking about living human beings, and over here we're talking about dying human beings, and they both have to come to a place of inhumanity and trauma. These people are growing up. These children are growing up in the inhumanity, where they can't even go to high school without going to metal detector before some kid's gonna blow their brains out or blow up the school. These are warriors protecting their families and keeping the savagery away, and the result is still the same. That's mind-blowing to me.
And I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you all made that connection, because we first learned about PTSD, we thought it only applied to soldiers coming back from war.
Right.
And then when you look at the symptoms and you look at we look at our community, because we are at war, right? It's the same symptom. We are suffering from PTSD. So I know, like, the biggest hurdle is convincing, people in our community, like, hey, we're suffering from PTSD at different levels, like you mentioned earlier, because we go through the same thing that soldiers go through in our community, right? And that's like probably the biggest hurdle to admit, like, I'm suffering from PTSD. This is PTSD, And I think that's probably like the toughest thing we have to, realize, that we do suffer from PTSD.
Right. And, one of the things, we always talk about these quote unquote coping mechanisms, or what I call self-medication. We look at the things that we choose, whether we choose the bottle, the needle, the pipe, or even use religion. I have I said, if I were to ever write this book, I would definitely need security. And the title would be Jesus is the New Crack. Because of what religion, along with these other drugs, has done, it's become an escape hatch. It doesn't help you confront the reality that you have to navigate. It's like you escape. Okay, for how many ever hours is your Sabbath? You don't get instruction. You don't go into your respective house of worship for empowerment. You go for escape and entertainment to make you forget what's out there. So,
or what's in there in your own home.
Right. And I can't remember. There's a biblical verse that talks about sheep being sent out amongst wolves. And I think a lot of times that we've been sent out as sheep amongst wolves with no weaponry, no understanding of the terrain, no understanding of there's nothing wrong with you. you're just in an insane society. And a lot of times we feel that in order to deal, that we must participate in that insanity, which becomes even more detrimental to us, not only psychologically, but culturally, spiritually, and otherwise.
It's kind of like how, we were talking about that before she came on. Like, that's exactly like 100%. Like, I'm glad we're making these connections because we do when whether it's the bottle and I definitely religion. I think a lot of times we downplay how religion works like a drug, right? In so many different ways, it works like a drug. It gives us cognitive dissonance. All of these things. And I get it. I get for our ancestors that were brought to this country. I know for a lot of them, church was the only place that the slave master let them be who they are, right? So that's where those Negro spirituals come in, and we were sending messages and coded messages in that. And I get it, but initially they didn't want us to be saved, quote unquote, and go into that religion because they felt like we didn't have souls. But then they used it as a way to control us, right? And we were told that we would get our righteousness and our just due when we go to heaven.
When we die.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's been a coping mechanism for us.
Yeah.
In many cases, a safe haven, right, for us, because it's one of the few places where white people let us congregate together safely without harming us. So I get that. I get that.
That used to be the case.
DNA, right? It's in our DNA. I get that. But yes, I think locally in the 20th century and the 21st century, it is been used like a drug for us.
Oh, it's always been, Well, why? Because we're trying to cope. We've been trying to cope all this time. Mm-hmm. And we're really not the ones who have a coping problem. We're not really the ones with the cope. We can manage. We can finagle if that's okay. If that's what we got to do, take me a hit, a couple of shots or whatever. I'm good. Okay, I can. You think you're dealing with it, but somebody loses their job and they're jumping off of a building, right? Killing their wife and their children. I don't think we have the coping issue. I think we have. There are mechanisms. They might not be the right mechanisms all the time, but we have to do something to cope because our trauma never ends. It's ongoing every day. All you got to do is wake up and walk out the house, and everybody can see what neighborhood you live in, what color you are, things like that, and everybody else gets to hide. Until they are in a situation where they're forced to cope, and they don't usually do very well because in their minds, I'm supposed to have everything I want, and if you're getting it, I'm going to go to the boss and complain until I get what I want. And there are a lot of people on this planet that just do not know how to cope. And religion, I was saying, and I'm speaking as a licensed ordained minister, has always been the fallback. I don't want to believe it. Okay. I'm going to hide from it. It doesn't exist. I'll pray it away. I'm just don't want to be, but the Lord will take care of it. I hear it all the time. It's a drug. Right. So
now,
go ahead.
Oh no. As you were talking about that, even within that, I think there's, and I guess I'm speaking from a metaphysical perspective. There was an old spiritual that the elders in the South used to sing, and the chorus is, "I'm so glad trouble don't last always." So something intuitive within the people understood that nothing lasts forever. And that was a part of the coping mechanism in understanding that metaphysical law where there's a season for everything. They may not see that season change, but something intuitively within them understood universal law and held on to that in the midst of what Alan Greenspan calls the age of turbulence. So within that turbulence, there were still some, I've always said that the African spirituality within us was never fully driven out because there was something intuitive within us that understood basic universal laws. It may have been translated into, be it a Christian, a Hebrew, an Islamic dialogue, but underneath that, we still had an understanding of certain universal principles. So that's why that song was always prevalent among elders in the South, because there was something intuitive that they understood, even though they may not see that day, they understood that that day would come.
Agreed. And you know what? You made a point too, Brother Shawala. I don't know how you're so thorough all the time. you leave us with nothing, right, to say.
No, but I mean, he's right, because you're seeing young people, more and more young people going into African traditional religions. African, you see a lot more young people than my generation.
Right.
When I was younger, it was just a few people here and there. But now I go around, and it's more and more young people who are, commemorating ancestors, doing libations, going into the Yoruba, going into the Lukumi. Like, I see more and more of them doing it, particularly young people. Like my daughter's 22, so like her generation is really like seeking these paths that was already it's already in us, right? It's already in us.
Because
and they
DNA is a mother father.
It is. So you're right. You're right. And I think Minister Zumbi, you hit the nail on the head when you said it was just waiting for the right time for it to come out, and it's here. So I agree. You're hitting it right on the head. So and I just want to point out that the notes also said that we were supposed to talk about religion, and we're already doing that. So we're all on track. So yeah.
I will say this. When I was in high school, I had to take Latin because I wanted to be a doctor. I ended up being a doctor, just not their kind. And I remember specifically the word religion meaning to go back to that which something like created you, or go back to where you came from.
Okay.
And legare.
Legare.
Right. Okay.
And I always kept that in the back of my mind. I've studied several religions. I like them all, and I hate them all, because they're just it's just what it is. It's just like education. You can accept and you can reject. There's nobody has the whole picture, and nobody has the non-picture. Everybody has a little bit of truth, and everybody's got a whole lot of lies. So when you talk about going back to the true source, it never ends at the person or the persona, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, or whatever. That's just the physical manifestation. The true source will always be what it is. And that's the true source that created us all. When I think about the fact that I'm a little speck on a planet that's spinning around in space by some force that nobody can explain. They've tried. It just makes everything so much bigger to me. And it's bigger than the name Jesus. It's bigger than Jehovah, Allah. It's bigger than all the names. It's bigger than all of that. Because you're taking this much of what you know and being given this much of what they know, so we don't know. we're in a chasm of stupidity right now. People are always going to say what they think and what they feel, and they're going to call it truth and fact. And they're welcome to do that. However, coping is literally hoping. When you think about it, I'm so glad that trouble don't last always is hope. You're saying, I'm going to deal with this because I know it's going to come to an end. Now, it may come to an end, and I don't want that end to be my death. I would prefer to live to see the end of the stupidity era and to move on to a greater era. But at the rate, the stupidity and the dumbing down of us as victims of trauma, when I'm talking about everybody. We're on this planet together, and there has not been anything that has happened yet to make us do this. Nothing has threatened our safety, our security. Not even COVID came close. It would take something massive to the planet, that would happen to the planet, that would cause us to see that these colors, there's still blood inside. These things, money won't buy anymore, And so I think we're trapped.
Okay.
We're trapped, and we're in a place where we don't know how to get out. And we're looking for somebody to come up with an idea to get us out of our own foolishness. So the mental health trap that we are in is a lack of hope. And the lack of hope that, number one, the foolishness will end, the bigotry will end, the racism will end, the discrimination will end, the stupidity will end, the lack of education will end, the destruction of the planet, that's going to end, But until all of these things happen, I'm hoping. And in my hoping, suppose it doesn't. Just hear me out. Suppose it, everybody has a thought. Suppose we just die like this. You don't think that's trauma to your mind? You don't think that's coming out in our physical bodies? You don't think that's causing people to have all kinds of physical problems? So one of the things that I was saying on the other station to myself is that I treat my clients sometimes with emotional trauma healing as a very painful thing to experience for them and for me. To watch someone shed the pain, to emotionally shed it, but to see how it had physically crippled their body. I actually looked at a person who was like this, and they were like this because in their mind, they were holding on to themselves, right? They were afraid, and they were, something's gonna get me. I'm scared. It was fear, and the fear had literally crippled their arms, their hands, their entire bodies, and to the point where they were actually looking just like this. And so, in my practice, I do what I do because I know it to be true. I know that the mind and the body and the spirit are one. And I know this because the physical manifestation of the issue that I treat directly relates to what caused the hurt in the first place. people, for example, and I'm not saying this, I'm not saying it generally, I'm not saying it specifically. If you have had trauma in your body as a woman, where you were raped or abused sexually or any kind of way, a number of women will experience ovarian cancer or cancers in their womb, you know, and the body has this ability to try to heal itself with the web. It's called why does the word leave me? It'll come to me. I can't think of it right now. I got too much on my brain. But the body literally forms a web around the painful area. Physically, it forms
Right.
it. And we use methods that help release the body and tell it, okay, you can let go now. Just like if you go to the store and you buy a steak or you look at a steak, you look at a steak and you see this marbleized stuff, fat or whatever you call it on the skin of it before you get to the meat. This web of protection, and it happens instantly when the animal is murdered. Or, yeah, I would say murdered, killed. Where it goes into protect. Well, our bodies do the same thing. It's trying to protect us. The brain, when it is tired of thinking or it's overwhelmed with thoughts, it creates a web over the brain. And you see patients that have Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's. That's a form of stress. Conditioning or stress coping, and so that's why my work to me is very important, because it's not critical, but I'm not the most important thing. But if I can help a couple of people understand and that, okay, you can let go now, and they start loosening up and opening up and letting go and feeling free, that's a life changer.
It brings up a couple of books that I'm going to put into the record. Okay. One I'm assuming you've already read is You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. Okay. That particular
it wouldn't be down here. My library is kind of massive, so I only bring a few books down here. But it sounds familiar.
Yeah, so Louise Hay, you can heal your life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in that book, there's a chart where she actually lists, she has a list of diseases, and from her experience, what is the metaphysical origin of those diseases? Okay. And there's another book. It was written by a woman in Australia. It's like a 2-volume book, but volume 1 is called The Metaphysical Origins of Disease.
Mm-hmm.
And it's real extensive, where you pick a disease and it will go into the metaphysical origins of that disease. It kind of reminds me of what Reverend Ike used to teach, is that things go through 3 phases. Everything begins in the ether. So you go from the ether to the psychic. Then you go from the psychic to the physical or the material.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming in your practice,
exactly
disease and trauma go through those 3 stages. Okay.
Absolutely.
So by the time we reach the physical manifestation, and in Western medicine, they never make that connection. Everything is always compartmentalized.
Right.
As opposed to taking a more holistic approach.
Yeah, because you don't treat the whole person, because you don't see the whole person. I was trained to treat this with that drug, and so that's what I'm going to do. You are a person. You don't matter. I wasn't taught to talk to you and listen to you. I was taught to give you a remedy. So, and the things that I do, like you said, and I'm going to get this book this other one you mentioned. I think I have this one by Louise Hay, but
Okay.
there's a book. What's the name of the other one? I'm sorry.
I want to say it's The Metaphysical Origin of Disease. I can't think of the author, but she's an author out of Australia. I know the book is on Amazon. The book probably runs about maybe, I want to say $45.
Yeah.
It's a thick book, maybe about the size of an old-fashioned phone book, for those who remember phone books. But it's very thorough when you choose the disease and then you look at its metaphysical origin.
Right. I have a few books, and I'd like to add that one to my collection. Phyllis Balk, Herbal Remedies, Natural Remedies, and they tell you, you know, all the types of things that you can take instead of pharmaceuticals, you know, like supplements and herbs and things like that.
Right.
And that's what I use. I recommend. In fact, Fit Goddess. She's on my case, man. So, well, what is critical to me is that if we don't address things in the correct manner, where we look at the whole body and the whole person, then you're not really treating them. One of the things that I just started doing, I'm not really comfortable with it yet, but I've been doing it for a couple of years, and that is DNA collection, where you swab yourself, you send the sample in, and we have a series of products and plant-based products and recommendations that are customized just to you, for you, based upon what diseases you're predisposed to, what's going on with you mentally, physically, emotionally, and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, it may be different because we just finished talking about who your true source is. And if that's your true source, then it made you, and then the earth formed you and jacked you up, transformed you. Then you got to get retransformed and get back right to your true source. So if that's what the true source is, then that would know. It would be reading your body and your makeup and say, hey, no, take it down a notch, you know. And these types of people who are in the world that help us see these things and help us realize these things, and all of the resources that we have, like biometric scanning and DNA testing, plant-based supplements, you know, natural health, physical fitness, and things that we use, herbal remedies, essential oils, or whatever, all the things that I use, reflexology, aromatherapy. These things may not be for everybody, but at least they're options, as opposed to just popping a pill that doesn't work or just fixes one thing while creating 10 other things. You know, we one of the things we're talking about again was a lack of identity. If you don't know who you are, what you're made out of, who your mom and your dad, what they're made out of, and what they're dealing with, then you're already missing. So we just need to get back to the root and the source. And then I know we're out of time, and I apologize because this is going so well.
But here, another thing that just came to mind is, and this is something that I've always wanted to address. When we talk about trauma, at least at a spiritual level, there seems to be this need, this addiction. You know, I always hear it with cats on the street about, we've got the hustle and grind. We got to hustle and grind. We got to hustle and grind. I said, well, wait a minute. Why can't you be? If you are, as you talk about, being connected spiritually, because in the Torah, in the Bible, in the Quran, it always talks about being. When you look in nature, you don't see When was the last time you ever saw a tree having to hustle and grind to be a tree? It's being what it's built to be. Okay. The grass, no matter what goes on politically with man or whatever, it never has to hustle and grind to be what nature built it to be. And it seems like with man or with humanity, they don't do what they're built. They're not being who they're built to be. So it seems like when you always talk about having to hustle and grind, you're acting out of who you are by nature, in my opinion. Okay.
I agree.
And I say, if you say that you are a child of the universe or a child of the Most High, whomever, when was the last time you ever heard the Most High having to hustle and grind to create the universe, to create Earth, the animals, the environment, and ultimately humanity?
Well, you always answer your own questions, and
Well,
that's what I love about wisdom, is that I respect and appreciate your insight so much, because we have a problem with time. We feel like we're running out of it all the time, and most people, especially men, are usually running out of time. And when I look at, if I got brothers and nephews, cousins, uncles, fathers, and I'm concerned about their health, whether I'm gonna see them tomorrow or not, because these fools around here shooting, and we were put in a society where movement is critical for our life. We got to stay moving just to keep from getting dead.
Right.
And that's not the way you're right. That's not the way we're designed to be. And you don't have to do that. You don't have to do it all the time. But the question I would ask is, when are we allowed the opportunity to just be? Nobody's going to give that to us. But every day you go into your own house somewhere, maybe somebody else's house, but you got a room, you got a bed, you have 24 hours in a day. You can make time to just be. You can unplug, take the headset off, close the laptop down, turn the cell phone off. You can do that. That's an option. And you can just be. It's critical to my life, at least 20 minutes a day. Well, I just turn it. I don't want to think about anything. I don't want to care anymore. Right. But we're in a society that we're forced. Well, here, you got to get to work. Got to be there. Chasing deadlines, timelines. Everything but the lifeline. And then next thing you know, you're laying in a casket. It's like, what did I do with all my time? I'm gone. That's a choice.
It's infamously called the rat race for a reason. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you are constantly, there's a term that's used called chasing the dragon. If you're constantly chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing, like you said, when do you ever get the time to just be, because you're constantly driven to do?
Yeah, you got to make the time. You got to make it. There's no way.
And you're always, at least from a man's perspective, you are never defined by who you're being and who you're becoming. You're always defined and judged by what you do.
Exactly. And that's the answer to your question. Because you need to be defined by what you do. By man who did not make you.
Right.
So if you're living for him, you can't live for God. Because God says Just be. So
Yeah.
you know what time it is, brother. I got to ask you the three giveaways, just takeaways before we leave. So three things that you would, because she would never forgive me if I didn't ask you.
Oh, okay. Um,
The three things that you think or would suggest to keep us from getting caught up in the mental traps.
hmm,
Number one, and also coping mechanisms that you would suggest, and how to keep from conditioning ourselves to that mindset of just doing all the time, which causes the trauma, which causes the health problems.
okay.
So, could you
Uh,
could you close
I,
us
I
out?
would I would come now. I'm going to come from an African centered perspective because that's who I mostly deal with. Uh, One thing that I always suggest is being in moments or being in segments of silence,
Mhm.
because there's something healing about silence,
Mhm.
okay, where it allows you time. I think there's a subtle healing when you are in silence, uh, and especially when you engage in meditation. I know we had talked about that
Mhm.
on a previous show. uh, Another thing that I would recommend is to begin reading about who you are as a people, not slavery, okay, per se, or go beyond slavery. All right. We need to read about our heroes and sheroes throughout the African world community over history. You know, we
Mhm.
hear about Nat Turner, but do we hear about Zumbi dos Palmares in Brazil? We hear about Harriet Tubman, but do we hear about Queen Nanny of the Maroons in Jamaica or Queen Yasantiwa on the African continent? Because one of the things that Malcolm always said is, if a man has never known that he has ever done anything, then he can never do anything. Because when you are a historically grounded and conscious people, you can never truly be enslaved on any
That's
level.
right.
Okay. So get into understanding who you are as an African people. I talked about silence. Okay. And also understand that there's nothing wrong with you, but something has happened to you.
That's right.
So you have to become, I would say you would have to become your own healer. Okay. There's a difference between health and medicine.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Medicine deals with what I call the immediate or the short-term trauma, but the health is our responsibility, and it has to be a holistic health. Okay. We have
Absolutely.
to approach our health
From a
holistically,
holistic.
understanding
Mhm.
that everything is synergistic. Okay.
Right.
One thing will affect another. So what happens to you spiritually will affect you emotionally, will affect you mentally, and
And
ultimately affect
physically.
you physically.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just like that three tier that Reverend Knight used to talk about: the ether, the psychic, and then the material. Okay. So begin to deal with yourself holistically and synergistically.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We always say meditation is our medication.
Check.
And thus is so. Thank you so much, brother, for being up here. Thank you, brother Dan went out, so we're good. We
Okay.
didn't. I didn't start out well, but we ended up great, and I'm so glad you came, brother Shawala. Um, thank you guys for being here with us tonight. We thank you for tuning in. We're dealing with Mental Health Awareness Month. This month is May Mental Health Awareness Month. We've been talking about mental traps that cause health problems and how it happens. We are thankful for our sponsors tonight. Thank you for our brother, brother Seiko, the Fit Goddess, who came in late, who came in to share with us in the last few minutes. So we want to thank you guys. Thank you, brother Dan, and we're so grateful for this platform to share with you guys. Let us know what you think. Thank you for the comments. We'll be on live broadcasting on YouTube and Facebook, so you can see it if you missed it. And we're going to be tuning out until next Monday. Thank you all for tuning in, and have a great one. Okay? All right.
Peace.
Thank you, brother.